Alrighty, boys. We got the first round of the playoffs, week NFL 15 for our SGS Fantasy Podcast. I'm going to go ahead and go through some of the games that we had this last week. I'll start off with the consolation ladder, and we'll see how that's going. First off, we got Connor versus Jack. So this one was a really big game just because of the fact that this would show who last place could end up being. I believe both teams had the worst records in our league this year. Indeed, they did. So this was a pretty big matchup. Connor got the dub. He played really well. Jack's team struggled. He had some unfortunate players, including from his flex, tight end. His kicker didn't do anything. Just a bunch of players that did not play well for him. Gus Edwards only had 5. Dalton Schultz only had 2. Justin Tucker had -1. I believe it's because he missed a field goal at the end of the game or something like that, I think maybe. Or some time around the game he missed a field goal, and that's what caused him to have negative points, and it was a long one too. So, but yeah, very unfortunate for Jack. I mean, Tom Brady played pretty well. He did hit his projection line. ETN did okay. James Cook did okay. He just didn't get a lot of production out of his wide receivers. DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper just didn't put up a lot of numbers this week. Now for Connor's team, his running backs outperformed Jack's running backs, as well as Jalen Waddle single-handedly outplaying DK and Amari this week. So very, very good week for Connor. Brock Purdy's been a really good starting QB for fantasy so far since he's came in for San Francisco. He hit his exact fantasy projection too. So really good week for Connor. He won 102.7 to 76.1. I'm not too sure how the consolation bracket goes. I don't know if the ones who lose keep playing. I don't think so, because it depends league to league. I'm not too sure about that, but if that's the case, let's say that it does end up being that that this is the last game Jack plays of the year, then he will end up being last in our league, unfortunately. So I'm not too sure, though. I could be wrong, but I need y'all to let me know if that's true or not. But I'll go ahead and go on to the next game. We got I'll probably find out whenever I do the projections. So team waiver wire versus Commissioner KD. So Bryce versus Kyle. Sucks for Kyle. He had a very, very, very slim chance of making the actual playoffs, but he didn't make it. But he actually put up a really good week for his fantasy team. Dak Prescott had a really good game. His running backs performed well. James Conner and Najee Harris. Devontae Smith and Dawson Knox had big games too. Not really good production out of Marquise Brown. Not the best production out of Allen Lazard either. But he did actually put up some good numbers with a couple other key players he had. Bryce's team, on the other hand, just didn't really have a lot of production out of his running backs. It was kind of a toss-up starting Pacheco and McKinnon. Maybe both of them could have ended up having decent games. Pacheco had 8, which isn't horrible, but isn't the best because he was projected 12.7. But it was Jerick McKinnon that had the huge game. He had 30. Massive game. I believe the best game of his whole career. So that was a big game for him. Deontay Johnson had a solid game. Chris Moore didn't do anything for Houston. Zonovan Knight didn't do anything for Jets. Deshaun Watson didn't really do his projection. He only had 15. But Kyle got the dub. He won by 109.5 to 98.2, so 11-point dub for Kyle, and he will be moving on in the consolation bracket. Now we got Chance versus Andy. This was the other consolation game, the last one out of the 3 that we had. Very tough for both of their teams. They also had chances to make the playoffs but did not get in, so now they're playing in the consolation. Chance's team played very solid this week. his start of the week had to have been Zay Jones. Zay Jones had a massive game. Jacksonville's, with their team, they've been kind of mixing up the wide receivers that go off every week, and Zay Jones has seen a lot more production recently, I've noticed, and this was the biggest game he's probably had of his career. Either this one or he had another really big game not too long ago, but very massive game for him. He put up 31.9. Aaron Jones had 18.6. That was a great game for him, especially after the last couple weeks, A.J. Dillon kind of taken over a little bit. Didn't get a lot out of Mac Jones. Didn't get a lot out of the Buffalo players, Diggs and Singletary. Lockett had an okay game. His kicker had 12, which was good. But, yeah, he got enough points to get the dub. Andy's team, on the other hand, just not a lot of production. It was very unfortunate for him to have two Cincy running backs to start this week, because I believe he didn't have any other running backs that he could have started at all that would have produced. And so just not a good running game for Cincy against Tampa Bay this week. Tua had a pretty decent game. He didn't hit his projection, but he still played well. CeeDee Lamb had a great game. Brandon Ayuk played really bad. Gerald Everett didn't do the best. Olave didn't do the best either. The Bills' defense struggled, so they ended up doing -2. But it's really what hurt him was his wide receivers and his running backs, other than CeeDee Lamb for wide receivers, not producing this week, and that's what caused him to lose. But Chance got the dub, 112.1 to 70.4, and so Chance is moving on in the consolation bracket. I think Chance overall is going to win in the consolation bracket, but just saying Kyle could put up a fight against Chance. We'll see what happens with all that. But anyways, now we got now we're going to the actual playoff bracket. We're starting off with one of the hottest teams in our league, Seth, taking on Jace. So Seth's team's just been unreal ever since Joe Burrow started putting up the numbers he's putting up. He's been having a monster performance every week. So he had another really good one, 28.8. Big loss for Seth, though, is Jonathan Taylor is out the rest of the season. So now he's going to have to fill in a running back spot, which he does have. Raheem Mostert, who had a really pretty big game last week. So that's a solid start to put in. Other than that, Tony Pollard's doing what Tony Pollard does. He had 12. Tyreek Hill's doing what he does. He had 17. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a decent game, 11.7. George Kittle had a pretty monster game this week with 23, and then T. Higgins with 13. He's just doing what he does best. So, yeah, ever since the Cincy players started stepping up for Seth's team, his team has been having a lot of really good performances, as well as Tony Pollard starting to take over that running game in Dallas, with Zeke still getting some touchdowns from here and there, but Tony Pollard's been putting up numbers. Tyreek Hill, one of the top wide receivers in our league. And then seeing a lot of production out of George Kittle, too, helps out, too, because he's one of the best tight ends when healthy. So now with Jace's team struggled. Just didn't really get a lot of production out of everyone, from his tight end to his flex to his defense to his kicker. He just didn't get any extra points from them to help him somewhat have a chance. Justin Herbert didn't have a good game either. He only had 14. Derrick Henry had 24. He had a really good game. Josh Jacobs only had 12. Didn't hit his projection, so he didn't really do the best. Keenan Allen had an all right game. Mike Evans had an all right game. Pat Freiermuth having 0 is crazy. Very unfortunate game for him. Did he get hurt? No, he didn't get hurt. He just didn't get targeted. Wow. Yeah, so he didn't even get targeted all that game, which is a big shocker. And then Amari Rodgers did not have a great game for Houston. So Seth blew him out of the water. He beat him 122 to 82. Seth's team, if he continues to play as hot as he does, he's probably one of the favorites to win in this league right now, with how he's been playing. So, but I am going to go the next game with another team that's been playing really hot too, which is Dylan's team. Dylan versus Hayden this week. Man, it was a absolute blowout in this one too. It wasn't close at all. Dylan's team just put up monster numbers, and he got a lot of it, a big chunk of it for Jalen Hurts and Dalvin Cook. Both had really big games this week. He also got a lot of production out of his flex, his defense, and his kicker. He got 13 from Nick Folk, 12 from the Patriots defense, and he got 11 from Adam Thielen. So that really helped out right there because his wide receivers didn't really put up the numbers they should be with Christian Watkins and Mike Williams. J.K. Dobbins had a pretty decent game too, so Mark Andrews didn't do the best, but didn't matter. When you have Jalen Hurts putting up 41, it's really hard to beat. So what a big week right there for Dylan's team. And then with Bert's team, really what hurt him the most was the running backs and wide receivers he started. Devontae Adams did not have a big game, surprisingly. Miles Sanders didn't have a big game either. Leonard Fournette hit his projection, but with him sharing carries with their rookie White, it's been kind of hard for him to produce as much as he should be. Geno Smith had an okay game. He didn't hit his projection. He had 19.9. Cam Akers and Noah Fant had decent games, tight end and flex spots, but he didn't get no points from the Cowboys defense, and then his kicker only got 5. So just didn't really get a lot of production out of those parts on his team, and that's what really hurt him. Just did not put up a lot of points this week. No one went off on his team. That was another thing, while you have Dylan's team having 2 players go over 20 points. So Dylan got the dub 135-73, almost putting up 2 times as many points as Bert's team did, and so Bert is now out. I forgot to mention Jace is now out too. So really good season for both of y'all, especially Bert's team. Bert ended up having a pretty good record to end the year, but he just unfortunately played a really hot team in Dylan. He has been playing really well since he got back and slipped into this playoff spot. So next up we have Connor Tuck versus Crew. So hottest team in our league by far, Crew. He's definitely been producing all year, but him and Seth have the same record, and Seth's been playing really hot too. So, but Crew's team put up really good numbers, but it was a close matchup on this one. He only won by 9 points. Connor Tuck's team fought very well. Connor ended up slipping into one of the playoff spots, which was nice. He only had like a 38% chance, so it was really, really fortunate for him to slip in. Yeah, Crew's team, Mahomes, number 1 QB in fantasy right now. He dropped 39. Cordell Patterson had a decent game. He hit over his projection. DeAndre Swift had 10. Terry McLaurin had 10. Kelsey had 15. Gabe Davis had 7. Drake London with 8. 49ers defense with 10. So really Mahomes giving him a big chunk of those points really helped him out a lot with him and Travis Kelce, because they're just a deadly duo to have on any fantasy team right now. Connor Tuck's team, they played well, just didn't get enough done. Really what hurt him was Daniel Jones didn't hit his projection. He only had 13 this week. McCaffrey had a big game, and so did Saquon, because he's got 2 of arguably the best running backs in fantasy, with Saquon and McCaffrey both putting up 20. A.J. Brown had 22. He's been one of the best wide receivers. Christian Kirk's been a really solid wide receiver too. He had 12. Evan Ingram with 10. George Pickens with 6. Rams defense with 7. And Greg Joseph with 8. So it was just unfortunate that he didn't get enough points to get to Crew. But with playing a hot team like Crew, you've got to put up a lot of points in order to beat him. And he did put up a lot of points, just not enough. So 131.7 to 122.7. So Crew's moving on. He will actually be facing me next. And then that is our last matchup that we had this week, which was me and Carson. And arguably me and Carson probably had some of the best games in fantasy. The first time we played, I really wish I would have started Hawkinson, because I could have beat you that first week, but unfortunately I didn't do it. Second time was a wild finish. Only beat you barely with a Godwin catch. Now we're coming into playoffs, and me and you have two really hot teams, and we both put up the most points out of all the matchups that we had this week. I mean, he got 26 from Justin Fields. Justin Fields has been pretty good in fantasy so far this year. Elliott's been getting touchdowns, so he put up 14. Brian Robinson with 11. Probably the best wide receiver in fantasy, Justin Jefferson, he had 24. Michael Pittman with 14. Really big game from Murray, too. He had 20 for Denver. Buccaneers defense with 5. Cameron Dicker with 6. Tyler Higbee with 10. Now with my team, really who carried me the most was Ramondre and Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a massive game with 41. Chubb's been on a slump lately. Ever since Deshaun Watson came back, he only had 9. Stevenson had 23.8, so he's been playing lights out ever since he started taking most of the carries, and with Damian Harris being out, that helps. Jamar Chase with 15. Ever since he came back, he's been producing. Garrett Wilson with 11. Hawkinson with 6. Godwin had 18, and the Cardinals defense had 11. Graham Gano had 12. So I really had a lot of players play very well this week other than Chubb and Hawkinson, and that's what helped me get the dub this week, putting up 150, and Carson put up 132. So it was a pretty close matchup. We put up a lot of points, but my team is hot right now, and I hope I can continue to stay hot coming into next week because I need to, taking on Crew's team. So now we're going into the Week 16 projections. So I apologize earlier about the consolation ladder. So now I know that the consolation, I think it might be double elimination if I'm not mistaken. I don't really know how the consolation works. I believe maybe it might be the best record team. I don't know. But we do definitely have, so I take that back about Jack being last in our league because he still has a chance to come back. So now he's going to be playing Bryce this week. And they've had some good matchups in the past. This one's going to be pretty good. Jack is projected to win right now, with everyone probably already making changes in their lineups. It's going to be close, though. It's only a 52% chance, so definitely got a pretty close matchup this week. Really interested to see how Deshaun Watson plays this week and see if he can start getting on a roll. And then you have Brady playing against Arizona. We got Etienne and James Cook, DK, Amari, Dalton Schultz, Gus Edwards. So really ain't changing up the team at all. I mean, those are your best players that you can keep in there. So hopefully they can have a better week this week compared to last week for your wide receivers specifically. And then with Bryce's team, not really too sure what he's going to do running back-wise with starting 2 KC running backs again. It's just hard to tell. Pacheco's probably been the most consistent, but McKinnon, with him having a big game last week, there's nothing wrong with putting him in the flex spot. But you could also throw in Goodwin, Campbell, if you wanted to maybe have any other options. And also, you do have Khalil Herbert, who could be coming back from IR, so that wouldn't be a bad start either. Playing a pretty tough Buffalo's defense, though, so you got to keep that in mind. But, yeah, with Jack and Bryce this week, I do kind of want to lean towards Jack's team this week. I think they're going to definitely perform better than last week. He doesn't have any injuries. Just the fact that Bryce is starting 2 KC running backs, I just don't know how that's going to work out. I don't think it's going to work out like it did last week for him. And then having both of his wide receivers questionable, chance of them not playing with Deontay Johnson and Traylon Burks. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'll lean with Jack this week. I think Jack's going to get the dub. And then next up, we got Connor and Andy. Connor's projected to win this matchup. Not really a lot of projected points in this one compared to some of the other matchups we're going to have this week. But I really like I kind of want to lean towards I kind of want to lean towards Andy's team this week, just because I feel like a lot of his players are going to put up better numbers. I think him putting Jeff Wilson back in might help, but him and Mostert having a share of carries in Miami, who knows who's going to have a breakout game, Tua's been playing very well, so I wouldn't worry about him too much. Joe Mixon needs to have a good comeback game. CD Lamb and playing a pretty tough Philly defense. Chris Olave playing Cleveland. So really it is going to be down to how the wide receivers and running backs play, obviously. Connor's got DJ Moore and Jalen Waddle starting this week. DJ Moore could have a pretty decent game. We'll see, against Detroit's defense, which did play pretty well last week, so we'll see if they'll keep that on a roll. But it's going to be a pretty close matchup. There's not really any changes I would make to y'all's lineups. Y'all pretty much have it all set the way it should be. KJ Osborne actually hasn't been a bad option to start with how he's been playing the last couple weeks. But I would still start DJ Moore and Jalen Waddle over KJ Osborne. So definitely probably stick with that. I'm going to go with Andy this week. I think Andy will get the dub, even though he's not projected to win, but I think that his team will have a better week and they'll perform well. So next up, we're going to have Kyle and Chance. So both of them coming off dubs in the consolation bracket. This one's probably going to be a really good matchup. I really like this a lot. Kyle's projected to win currently. Really not too sure who's going to win this one. This one's a toss-up for me. Looking at the lineups, really tough matchups for Kyle's team specifically. We'll see how Dak plays against Philly. Najee Harris is questionable. Marquise Brown hasn't been playing the best since he came back from that injury, and DeAndre Hopkins being back in the lineup, so he hasn't seen as much production, but I'm sure he's destined to have a good game at some point. James Conner's been playing really well. Lineup-wise for Kyle, there's not really anyone I would fill in to replace. You could maybe put Jamal Williams in for Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard hasn't been playing as well lately, from what I've seen. 1.9386 in his last 5 games, compared to Jamal Williams, who hasn't been doing the best himself either. But his last 5 were 24, 10, 9, 3, and 3. So ever since DeAndre Swift came back, he hasn't been really producing as well. So that one is a toss-up. I would probably still lean towards Jamal Williams against Carolina's defense, though. I don't really know how Green Bay is going to play against Miami's defense. They'll probably put up some points, but Allen Lazard just hasn't been one of Rodgers' favorite targets these past few weeks, with Christian Watson and a couple other wide receivers they have too that he's been thrown to. So I would probably lean towards Jamal Williams. You could also lean towards Tyler Boyd too. Tyler Boyd had 12 last week, so Tyler Boyd wouldn't be a bad flex spot either. Now with Chance's team, really, really looking good for him. We'll see how Mac Jones plays. That's kind of his weak slot right now. It's QB. But he's pretty strong in running backs, other than Singletary's kind of iffy. You just never know with him. It sucks that Tyler Lockett's out. That's honestly a big loss because now you have to fill in, it looks like, Jerry Jeudy, but you could also put in Curtis Samuel. How did Jerry Jeudy play last week? So Jerry Jeudy's had a couple big games recently. He had that 29-point performance against KC, and then he had 11 last week. So Judy's pretty solid. I don't know if Russell Wilson's coming back. We'll see what happens with all that. But, I do like probably starting Jeudy over Curtis Samuel this week. Curtis Samuel's been kind of struggling recently. He's only had one somewhat decent game in the last 5 weeks, so I would probably definitely lean towards having Jared Jeudy in your lineup. For my projection to win this matchup, I'd probably go and lean towards Kyle. I think Kyle's probably going to get the dub. Well, I don't know. I kind of want to lean towards Chance now. I just like some of Chance's matchups more. Probably go with you know what? I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna go with Chance this week. I think Chance will actually get the dub. But it's very close. It's probably gonna be one of the closest matchups we have this week. So we'll see what happens with that. Next up, we got Tuck versus Jace. So now we're going back into the playoff bracket. This one is going to be a big matchup right here in terms of both teams that are So Connor's coming off a big week, but Jace is projected to win. Jace's team just did not perform well, but I'm sure that they will step it up better this week. Really, with Jace's lineup, I don't really see anything that I don't like. You could, with Pat Freiermuth having a donut last week, Kenny Pickett is coming back, but Goddard's been pretty solid all year. He's had a couple iffy games, but Goddard is not a bad option to put in there at tight end. Freiermuth's been playing well. He's just very consistent. He hasn't had like one big game this year. Goddard has. So Goddard has that potential to have a big game. They are playing a tough defense in Dallas, so I could see why you don't start Goddard. But that one's a toss-up. Maybe should just stick Freiermuth in there. But it just kind of scares me with him having 0 targets last week, which was wild to me. Other than that, everyone else looks pretty solid in your lineup. Hopefully you'll have some performance from Justin Herbert this week. They are playing Indy, so I think he will definitely play better against Indianapolis. Then we got Tuck's team with Tuck. Got Christian McCaffrey's questionable this week. His lineup, I don't really... Arguably, you could start Aaron Rodgers this week. I mean, Aaron Rodgers hasn't been playing bad these last couple weeks. He hasn't been putting up big numbers, but Daniel Jones has been playing well too, and he's playing against Minnesota. So, yeah, maybe lean towards Daniel Jones this week just because of matchup standpoints, because Minnesota has been giving up a lot of points this year to teams. But, yeah, other than that, there's not really any other changes I would make to your lineup. I think Darren Waller is coming back, so you could. It's tough to decide if you'd rather put Darren Waller or Evan Ingram in, because Evan Ingram's been having a couple pretty decent games recently. So, and especially that monster game he had a couple weeks ago. So, I think I want to lean towards. I think Jace's team comes back strong, and I think Jace's team will end up getting the win this week. But this will be another really close matchup. Really is a toss-up, so I'm just playing a guessing game at this point. Next up, we got Carson and Burt. So the other loss bracket in our playoffs, I do want to look at something real quick before I... Okay, gotcha. So yeah, this is a part of the winner's consolation ladder. I was just getting confused for a second, but so yeah, out of the winner's consolation ladder, so it's going to be Tuck and Jace, and now it's going to be Carson and Burt in the other winner's consolation bracket. In this one, now wait, I want to see one more thing. Sorry. What about the consolation bracket in general? Oh, really? Huh. Okay. All right, so anyways, back to Carson and Bert's teams. So this one's actually going to be a pretty decent matchup. Definitely 50-50. This one's going to be very close. With injury-wise, it doesn't really look like anyone's hurt on anyone's team, which is good. So very healthy teams this week, which is a good thing. Other than Noah Fant's questionable, but that's not really a big deal. There's not really any change. Like the lineup that Carson has currently looks pretty solid. I'd probably keep all those pieces in. And then with Bert's team looks pretty solid too. Russell Gage had a big week last week, but I would probably still keep Cam Akers in that flex. He is playing a very tough Denver defense though, so that could be an issue. You could maybe throw either Rashad White, Julio, or Russell Gage in, because I think Julio's coming back, but I'm not too sure. That's just a tough matchup for Cam Akers, so we'll see what happens with that. But anyways, the matchups this week for some of those. So Geno Smith's playing against Kansas City. That'll probably be a pretty high-scoring game if I had to assume. Fournette against Arizona, Miles Sanders against Dallas, Adams against Pittsburgh, Hopkins against Tampa Bay. And then with Carson, Justin Fields playing against Buffalo. That'll be an interesting game to see how he plays. Ezekiel Elliott against Philly, Brian Robinson against San Francisco, Jefferson against the Giants, Pittman against the Chargers. So we got a couple tough matchups for some of these players this week. If I was going to lean one way, I want to lean towards Carson's team. I just think he overall has the better players. But Bert's team could go off any day of the week, and he definitely has players that can go off any week with Adams, Hopkins, Sanders. So any of those players go off this week, he will probably have a decent outing. So I'll lean with Carson this week, though. So now we're going back into the playoff bracket, so the winners from last week. The first matchup we have is going to be Dylan versus Seth. This one's going to be really, really good. I mean, all these matchups are going to be really good. I mean, I'm not expecting anything less. So Dylan, since Jalen Hurts is projected to sit this week because of an injury, I think he's still questionable, so he could play. If Jalen Hurts plays, I might lean towards Dylan this week. I really will, because I don't know how Gardner Minshew is going to play against Dallas, this being his first game starting this year, especially against one of the toughest defenses in the league. So that is very iffy. But that's really the only thing that could happen. A.J. Dillon's been having some big weeks. That is one person that I would maybe slip in, because he's had his past 3 games, 16, 19, 20, and now he's playing against Miami's defense. So you could maybe slip him in for Thielen. You could maybe slip him in for Dobbins, but Dobbins been playing decent. I would probably slip him in for Thielen. I honestly trust A.J. Dillon more than Thielen. Other than that, I mean, everyone else looks pretty solid that you have starting. It also comes down to Seth's team now. So with Seth, he's got so now Joe Burrow's going to have a little bit of a test taking on New England's defense. We'll see how that turns out if he plays well this week. Tony Pollard against Philly, Mostert against Green Bay, Tyreek Hill against Green Bay, Amon-Ra St. Brown against Carolina. I would watch out. He might have a big game this week. Kittle against Washington. You got T. Higgins, who is questionable, playing against New England. Really, with your lineup, I like who you're starting. You don't have anyone on your bench that really catches my eye that should start over anyone else, so I would definitely keep your lineup in. This is how I'm going to determine the winner of this game. If Jalen Hurts plays, I'm going to lean towards Dylan this week. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play, just because Joe Burrow has a really tough matchup, I believe he'll still produce. and he'll still outplay Gardner Minshew. So, so that's how I'm going to decide it. If Gardner Minshew ends up starting, then I would probably go with Seth. But if Dylan has Jalen Hurts, I would probably go with Dylan this week. So, but it's going to be very close. We'll see what happens with that. We should know in the next couple days if Hurts is going to play or not. So, but Hurts is currently the number 2 QB in the league. So, not having him is a big loss for Dylan's team. All right, last matchup is going to be me against Crew. So I have a 54% chance of winning this week. The only thing that worries me is I do have a couple questionable players, including my running back. So it's going to be Chubb and Stevenson. I do have Montgomery to fill in case one of them is out. But I'm not really too excited about Montgomery's potential this week with Khalil Herbert coming back. They're playing against Buffalo, which is a really tough defense. So I honestly like Garrett Wilson more, even though I don't like Zach Wilson passing Garrett Wilson the ball as much as Mike White. I think he will still get the ball against a pretty bad secondary that Jacksonville has. So I do like the matchup he has more than David Montgomery's matchup. I think Jamar Chase is going to have a decent week, but it is a tough New England defense. Josh Allen against Chicago. Hopefully he'll have another big game. I'm leaning towards the Lions defense this week. Kind of hard to decide on a defense, but I think they might play good against Carolina after having a good week last week, so I'll just ride with that. Now with Crew's team, really what worries me the most is Mahomes and Kelsey against the Seahawks, because they're just such a deadly duo, and they could put up 50 to 60 points for your team, and that's hard to come back with. Really, Mahomes, Josh Allen, this matchup's going to be pretty wild to watch. I don't know who's going to put up more points this week QB-wise. It's going to be interesting. It'll definitely lean your way if one of my running backs does end up being out. I would rather Chubb be out than Stevenson, just because of how Chubb's played recently. But it's going to be a really good matchup. We got some good wide receiver matchups too. Gabe Davis might have a big game. We'll see. McLaurin might have a decent game. Gabe Davis has been on a downtrend lately, but I feel like he's destined to have a pretty decent game coming up. So this one's going to be really good. I'm very, very excited to see what happens, because Crew did beat me last time that we played very early on in the season, but I would like to get my revenge, and hopefully I can beat them this week so I can continue to move on in the playoffs and maybe get some of that moolah, baby. So, very, very good matchups this week. Let me know. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think, who is going to win it all this year. Who y'all think is going to be last, because I think currently Jack is projected last right now with his record and the points he put up, so we'll see. But we'll have to find out this week. This week's a really big week for everyone. And let me know also who's going to win in the winner's constellation. Let me know who y'all think out of these matchups, who's going to win. Me personally, I'd probably have to lean towards Tuck's team. I really do like Tuck's team a lot. But I did predict Jace to win. I think Jace is still going to beat him. So, but if I had to guess with how hot Tuck's team's been, maybe I would lean towards him. But Carson's team's really good too. Carson can put up a lot of numbers. So I would probably go with either Tuck or Carson for the winner's constellation. But we'll see. I'm just some of my decisions I've been making, some of the shit just don't make sense, dude. I am very fucking tired, so I apologize if my energy's a little bit down. I've had a pretty long week, so, doing all that Christmas shopping and shit. So, but I will, before I go, I know this has been a pretty long pod, probably the longest one I've had so far. I do want to go through some of the waiver wires, some players that people could add if needed. Doesn't really look like anyone needs to add anything. I could maybe mainly go to defenses. I'll just go ahead and start with, let's see. You could also go QB-wise, too, if anyone needs to fill in a QB. Not really a lot of QBs to get. I would probably maybe lean towards Kenny Pickett if you were going to pick up a QB this week. You could also maybe pick up Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson could have a really big week against a really bad Jacksonville defense, so I wouldn't see a problem with that whatsoever. So, yeah, just go ahead and figure out what y'all want to do with that. If y'all need a QB, those are my two favorites. Running back-wise, I would go with no one, to be honest with you. There's not really any running backs that catch my eye, so I would just keep whoever you have on your running backs and just keep them in. Wide receiver-wise, not really a lot of good options either, to be honest with you. Everyone pretty much has all the solid wide receivers, so y'all have wide receivers on your bench. Y'all can figure it out. Tight end-wise, maybe lean towards Bellinger against the Giants. Tight end, he could have a pretty decent game. We'll see. Other than that, I don't really see anyone else that catches my eye. I'm just going to go straight to defenses if anyone needs to pick up a defense this week. The matchups I like the most, I would maybe lean towards Dolphins. The Dolphins are playing Green Bay. Green Bay has been playing well lately, but the Dolphins' defense has been about the mid-tier this year, so they've had some pretty good games. They could have a good game this week because Green Bay's offense has been so inconsistent, so you just never know. You could also lean towards the Vikings defense against the Giants, but the Vikings have been giving up a lot of points lately, so that's a little iffy. Chargers defense is another good one. I don't think Indy's going to be scoring a lot of points now that Jonathan Taylor's out. Their passing game's horrendous. I would definitely probably go with the Chargers. The Jaguars isn't a bad one either. The Jets could not end up putting up a lot of points this week. It could be a defensive game. But, yeah, those are the matchups I like right there this week. So, yeah, I will go ahead and end this pod. Once again, guys, let me know who y'all think is going to win in this league. We are down to the last 4, so we're going to see what happens. It's getting really close, getting towards the end of the year. It's been a really great year for fantasy. We just got to continue to fight on, man. I am looking forward to hopefully having a chance to win this league. I feel really good about it, but I also don't feel good about playing crew. So we'll see what happens. Good luck to everyone this week. Hope y'all enjoy this pod. And, yeah, just keep riding on, baby. Let's go.